All right, we're in. So I will review the midterm next time. So, and hand out the final at the end of class. And in making up the final this weekend, I decided to go hard on you.
Nice.
Harder, anyway. And that is to say, to look at, okay, we're supposed to be looking at the interrelationships between Africa and here. But then I realized there's a lot to cram in between Africa and here. And just doing the 21st century in America is a lot. So rather than doing a straight historical treatment, I thought there are some things that you need to know that are broader than just events. So we're going to focus on those. And also there will be an eye for you to look at, you're going to have to do some reading from the books to be able to pass the final. It's already assigned reading, and it already assumes that you have done it, but this is a test to see that you actually have. That's where it's hard. It's not really hard, it's old school. Like you study more, then you need to pass the test, because if we start doing what George Bush would do, that is, yo child left behind, if the educational system starts just being teaching to test and not teaching you how to learn, you're screwed, or not screwed, controlled. If that's what you want to be, then okay. So I'm going to tell you about something you probably haven't heard of, though your taxpayer dollars paid for this, the IAM, the Institute for African American Mobilization. You saw some of the charts last week when infusing some of the charts into the course. Probably this is the only place that you'd get that. So what it was a 4-day culture-specific institute to facilitate community organization to promote substance abuse prevention. Now, substance abuse prevention in a community of color context does not just mean doing alcohol and drugs. It means AIDS. It means a bunch of stuff. It means engaging parts of the community that most people don't necessarily want to engage. So that's why we created it. So I was a contributor to the curriculum and a trainer at 3 deliveries, Annapolis, Fayetteville, and Eugene. The Eugene training was a trip because both Annapolis and Fayetteville have intact black communities. They're both in the South. They both were subject to the classic things that are used to control and sicken African American communities. Eugene, and basically the process of the IAM delivery started there, I think continued to this day. Eugene, it kind of faded, and faded in some predictable way. So created a model which is never really used federally because the obvious quasi-religious implications, but that's not so much what I'm going for, but the idea of African-American symbol epistemology, that is the way we know the world is through symbolic imagery and rhythm, right? So this symbol is actually older than the Jewish religion that it's associated with now. So I started basically looking at, okay, we need to focus, since the original money that funded the IM was the Center for Substance Abuse Prevention, which is a part of the National Institutes of Health, which is a whole federal chain of dollars that basically is about health promotion. We needed to focus beyond the regular, what's called in public health the environmental model, but outside of public health is called the public health model of disease prevention, and look towards other solutions. So within the symbology, so for example, this pyramid or a triangle, equilateral triangle. So it's either a pyramid, it's a triangle, In old ancient symbology, it's the blade, it's male energy, and it's also the environmental model within public health, all those things simultaneously. So the environmental model starts with the host. That's you, people. And then the agent, and then the environment. So basically, if you're going to prevent a disease, let's say malaria, right? You strengthen the host, you intercept or interdict or eradicate the agent, that is the malaria-causing mosquito that could potentially bite the host, or in the environment, you drain the swamp that produces the mosquito. Therefore, or another strategy could be you interbreed black Africans who are exposed to malaria and have developed a resistance to malaria with Indians or other folks, and develop inbred genetic malarial resistance. That, in fact, is what sickle cell disease is. Sickle cell is an genetic mutation which is a resistance to malaria gone bad. So you actually go sick, get sick from it. And only affects African Americans, but it basically happens in people who have been exposed to malaria for multiple generations. So with substance abuse prevention, for example, then you deal with the host, who is the potential addict or alcoholic, or the kid of the addict or alcoholic. You give the host skills, information, and support. The agent, you control the agent. So for example, during the rebellion, the whole alcohol outlet density piece was basically, let's reduce the liquor stores. So we use the policy, that is the environment, to change that, or we do other activities to change the amount of liquor stores. This inverted triangle, which in the I am public health model, so the regular public health model basically focuses on the host, agent, environment. And it's a disease model. It doesn't talk about focusing on health. It focuses on disease. So we decided to push that model to something more culturally specific. And basically add to the original public health model the internal community. Because part of African psychology, if you remember from looking at Naim Akbar, our psychology does not propose that you have a single unitary consciousness, like you are one person. You are also made up of a community of people. All the voices that helped you or hurt you along the way are incorporated in your being. And they talk to you. Sometimes they trash talk to you. So not only is our style of street ball basketball is no blood, no foul, but it's also being able to perform when people are trash talking you. You let your game speak, because the people who usually trash talk you don't have no game, and they try and throw you off your game by trash talking you. So your internal community has to basically be focused towards the positive. Then there's the external community, which can actually act like the internal community. There will always be someone basically who's like angry, got anger issues, as the counselor might say. There's always the wino that's wise, or the wino who's out of it. Like in my neighborhood, it was Mr. Jenkins. Now everybody knew Mr. Jenkins, the wino, could discipline us kids like any other kid. Like in my neighborhood, basically anybody could discipline me, because if I did something wrong, word got back to my house before I got back to the house. And any of those folks could discipline me along the way, because it was that concept of the village that raised the single child. Because my parents knew my friends and all those other things, and people understand that Mr. Jenkins became a wino because he wasn't always a wino. His wife died and it devastated his world. So he turned to drink. So that's why he got respect, and that's why he could also discipline us, because we remembered him from the time when he wasn't, when Mrs. Jenkins was still alive. All right, so even the wino could discipline in that village. And we understood that his drinking was, yes, it was part of his responsibility, but also we understand he was stricken by grief. He had his world blown apart, and because there was no mental health services in that part of LA at the time, he basically resorted to drink. Now, rereading your assigned reading, I noticed that there was basically some talk about some community development organizations that were run by women that I talked about, like Avalon Carver and Central City Community Mental Health Center. My father was medical director at Central City, so it was great to see that in the book. But understand, those were features that were put into the community by intelligent black people, because the system wasn't doing it for us. So, internal community, that's inside you. External community, how do you organize the external community? And then the world. All right, so when we talk about culturally valid technology added to or instead of mainstream technology. So when we talk about that concept of enantiodromia, that which arises from its opposite, the solution to the problem creates new problems, the cure to the disease is in the disease. The way you see the problem is the problem. So mainstream technology is developed as if there is no underlying spiritual relationship or moral implications to the technology. So for example, mental health. Okay? The American Psychological Association still to this day does not recognize that racism has any implications. That's why we had to develop our own science around detecting racism. It's not enough to say something's racist. You need to be able to determine where the racism is, who it's operating in, just like cancer, and be able to surgically remove it or to be able to skillfully negate it. Because if it's in a system, and it's a system that you have to deal with, you know, basically what institutional racism is the institution itself acts as if it's a Ku Klux Klansman as part of its normal operation. And people within it don't know that they're doing that until you point it out. And don't expect them to thank you for pointing it out. They'll target you. Just letting you know up front.
That's heavy.
Yeah.
You're using the same approach.
Right.
The problems.
Okay? Understand. If you're going to be like Jesus and overturn the table of the money changers, don't be surprised if the money changers pay the Romans to off you. That's what happened. Okay, I saw Thich Nhat Hanh on Oprah. So he's a Vietnamese Zen Buddhist monk who got exiled from his country. And he was explaining, you know, during the Vietnam era, when you saw these Buddhist monks immolating themselves, that is, they felt that they were voiceless. Like other people would think, oh, well, they're committing suicide, and they're committing suicide in a particularly gruesome way, which was dousing themselves with gasoline, sitting in full lotus in the middle of the street and lighting a match, burning to death in the middle of the street, and remaining upright until they go unconscious and die. He's saying that's not suicide. That's a statement. Our voices were being taken away from us. That was the only way we can make a statement. Now understand, they are making a statement to a government and to the world, because that's going out on live television, in a government that's controlled by the United States of America. When they're doing that. They're not doing that in Hanoi. They're doing that in Saigon.
Deal.
Okay? So understand, that's a statement to us. Not that we could understand, oh, why would this dude like commit suicide?
I was going to say, what?
Yeah.
Statement, yeah, but what?
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, the statement is understood there But what would the statement be by our leaders here if it's the same thing without necessarily killing themselves? So part of the reason I'm bringing this up about mainstream technology, all right, is that many of the things that you learn in school to get a job may or may not be of assistance to you in maintaining your healthy position as not only a viable cultural being, but also as an American. Because of your excellent suntan. People might not see excellence in you. So that's why you have to be like twice as good in certain ways that may or may not be visible. So anyway, mainstream technology, developed as if there's no underlying spiritual relationship, and that's what the I am model is basically trying to say. You have a connection to something greater than yourself. You have a life purpose. And there's a way of discovering it. So, mainstream psychology by itself, for example, operates as if isms are either normal, permanent, or too widespread to be changed. I mean, that's been the argument against saying, oh, well, racism is a mental illness. Well, if we say racism is a mental illness, it's so widespread, we'd have to say society's crazy. Yeah, right? Show me how it's sane. So, some of the implications for the I am public health model is you create your own solutions based on cultural strengths. So as an example, and this is where I started tripping in a certain way, because I was basically saying, okay, Ida B. Wells Barnett Cultural Recovery Centers. So they don't actually exist, but Ida Wells Barnett was a woman who basically publicized lynching. The Maroon Research Institute. So Maroons are freedom fighters who are mixed race, that is African and Native American. So how do we maintain freedom living next to or surrounded by a state that is created on slavery? The Black Star Travels Tours. The Black Star Line was Marcus Garvey's and the Garveyite movement, basically taking people back to Africa or to see places in the Caribbean and other places outside of America. Give you a more global perspective. The Billie Holiday Substance Abuse Care Unit. So many of our great artists, having to deal with the pain of racism and other things that they're dealing with, often became addicted. So what if we created treatment centers? Dare I say this? Well, I can. What if 50 Cent, who claimed that he made a lot of his money dealing crack, Jay-Z, who if he didn't do crack, also became a vice president of Anheuser-Busch. What if they funded treatment centers for all the people that they strung out on the dope that they had with their millions? What if they did that? What would that look like? Would they even consider that as an idea?
It's happened before.
It has happened before.
Eric Clapton did that.
Yeah, Clapton did that. But where are our black leaders that have made money off of both the alcohol industry and the underground economy? Where are they using their millions to fund treatment centers? I'm not hearing anything. The silence is deafening.
They're sitting at the BET, Oscar Awards receiving Grammys and all that for the same stuff.
Ah,
So
okay.
they're
Kevin Durant did
glorified.
it just recently, though.
Okay. So you can name a couple of people.
That's it.
That's it. All right. The Zora Neale Hurston Psychiatric Unit. Hey, not everybody resorts to substance abuse to deal with their psychological problems of, dealing with diversity issues, but it does become a major stressor.
Well, she never got no help.
And she never got help. So the idea is we need to create our own models based on our own cultural strengths. That's the idea. Right? Has been done, could be done again. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon Incorporated. And I'll explain that shortly. All right, so the Maroon Research Institute, seeking traditional and innovative ways to liberate your mind and spirit from slavery and create a new society. That's what Maroons were about. Okay, so for example, we're moving out of the 90s into the 21st century. So for example, assume that the mainstream media's portrayal of the O.J. Simpson trial is the way they want you to think about it. Okay, so this is the Maroon Research Institute. So what I'm doing in mainstream science would be called media literacy. So if you understand that, any media reflects the culture that generated it. And it reflects the cultural values of the culture that generated it. And you need to filter for that. So they're going to focus on a problem in a particular way. And the medium that they use will cause you to focus on the problem in a particular way. So often to bring a deep subject to television, television isn't designed to do that, to have you think. It's not. Which is why I have you read books, not just rely on a broadcast. Because if you do that, if you rely on just what I present here, there's a limit to what I can present here. Because of the media. Not because I want to, not because I'm limited. There's just a limit to it, right? So let's take an example of the OJ trial. This means, assuming the portrayal of the O.J. Simpson trial is the way they want you to think about it, this means you won't think of it in any other way because you're preoccupied with what the media circus was showing you. And what were they showing you? You remember that?
I don't.
Okay. Do you remember it being a topic? You were alive in 1995, right?
OJ trial?
Yeah. Okay, so what do you remember them talking about?
I remember them talking about the gloves.
The glove?
Tainted evidence
Tainted evidence?
by the cops.
White cops? Racism? Johnny Cochran?
I know what they didn't show.
What didn't they show?
That OJ was using meth,
Meth, cocaine, yeah, sure.
and that what's his name, Kalin was his drug dealer. That's
Cato
why he-
Kalin
that's why he
was
lived there.
possibly OJ's drug dealer? Okay,
Well, he
sure.
wasn't the dealer, he's the guy that went and got drugs for him, so he would.
Yeah. All right.
He was suffering from meth psychosis.
The reason that I'm bringing this up, okay, is because when you look at Trayvon Martin, brother's been dead for close to a year now. And what is the defense for Zimmerman starting to bring up?
That he was a gun thug.
Oh, that he was he was a gun thug, he was on drugs, he was in trouble at school, et cetera, et cetera. Like, what does that have to do with you shooting him 30 feet from his house? But that's what they're trying to smear his character, all right? So here's what the media was showing you. Rich black guy on trial for brutally murdering his white wife. Okay, now that was a subtext, but you know what I'm saying when I bring it. Oh, was that what they're talking about? Rich black guy on trial for brutally murdering his white wife. So the issues the mainstream media are talking about: race, sex, wealth, power, personal morality. So that there were definitely two Americas watching this trial. Because I remember, I was working here when this was happening, right? and that there were people that, celebrated when the verdict came down, and other people who were just outraged that people were celebrating, and I wasn't celebrating, but I understood why people were celebrating. So, in a Chinese theme, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, there's a movie of the same name. You see the obvious tiger, this is one level of interpretation, the simplest. You see the obvious tiger crouching before you. You ignore the more dangerous dragon behind the tiger. Which has more power, dragon or the tiger? Dragon, but you focus on the tiger. All right? So, race, interracial sex, wealth, power, the personal moral failures of O.J. Simpson, buying justice are the crouching tigers the mainstream focused on when they talked about it. Now understand what they're outraged about. They're not outraged that you can buy justice. They're outraged that a black guy could buy the same justice that a rich white guy in his same position could buy too. So they're not mad that the hidden dragon is you can buy justice. Wait, justice is supposed to be blind. Oh, no, it's not. You get different justice if you can pay for a lawyer, right? Now, Johnny Cochran, if you remember, because we've talked about his history in terms of Leonard Deadweiler and the other folks that Johnny represented, he was a city prosecutor, putting criminals away. When Leonard Deadweiler was shot to death by a CHP in front of his pregnant wife on the way to taking his wife to the hospital. That turned out to be a justifiable homicide.
Say he was shot by who?
California Highway Patrol. Deadweiler was on his way taking his pregnant wife who was in labor and shot to death in front of her when in a routine traffic stop going for his wallet. Johnny was a city prosecutor when he basically took on that wrongful death claim against California Highway Patrol. He lost. But it's not that he lost, but I mean, lots of black men were dying at the hands of police. Nothing new there. That also led to the founding and formation of Martin Luther King Hospital in the middle of the hood, not just USC County Medical. So, back to slide. Race, interracial sex, wealth, power, the personal moral failures of O.J. Simpson, buying justice, are the crouching tigers the mainstream media focused on. The hidden dragon, the conditions created by society which present domestic violence and racial self-hatred as normal, unquestioned, and unsolvable. Now, part of the subtext is, for me, I'm not celebrating that OJ got off. I'm pissed off because, well, I didn't like him. I still don't like him. And the reason I don't like him is because you know what my standard is for a black athlete. If you are not a scholar, if you are not an activist, if you are not working on behalf of relieving the oppression of black people, you ain't shit to me. As an athlete, I don't care what you do in whatever your endeavor is. That's nice that you did it. But you need to take that and do something with it for us, rather than provide entertainment. OJ never did that. And then cried racism when he got in trouble. Okay? Now, the black community knew that O.J. Simpson was domestically violent with his black wife. We knew that. That was reported in the black press. So, of course, when he's taking his black wife out to dinner and he sees the pretty 18-year-old, blonde-haired, blue-eyed waitress, Nicole Brown, and he shacks up with her in Brentwood. He's not going to do that in the hood. He goes back to the rich white area and, he's cheating on his wife and eventually leaves his wife. If he's domestically violent with his black wife, what do you think he's going to be doing with the new white one? He's going to be domestically violent there too. Now, there's a piece that goes along with it. So this is not portrayed in the mainstream media, but it is known in the black press. There's some other things that are not necessarily known. Okay, so what was not on trial? So this is a strings of the Cora analysis, the IAM public health model. All right, so what was not on trial society? So here's the Nicole number, and I'll write down, give you the formula. The Nicole number, 771. Goes like this. There's the formula. Take the number of years, days in a year, times 19, when she died, plus add 5 days, because there were leap years.
Nicole was 19.
No, there have been 19 years since she died. Okay, because it's 2013. Right? She killed in 1994. There have been 5 leap years in that time, so you add 19 times 365, that gives you the number of days. You add 5 days. Then you divide that by 9. That gives you 771, roughly. Here's what that number is. Every 9 days, that's why you divide by 9, in LA County, a woman is killed by her domestic partner. In LA County. There have been 771 women killed by their domestic partners, and you haven't heard squat about them. So if you look at it as a case of domestic violence, that's the hidden dragon. What are the conditions that make domestic violence constant, predictable, unquestioned? That's the hidden dragon.
Are those statistics taken into account in the projects alone?
These are good questions. These are reported. Not all domestic violences are reported. Okay? It's the same situation we're dealing with women in the military. The estimate of 20,000 rapes a year of women in the military. Okay? And how many of those are either A, reported, and B, prosecuted?
None.
Not none, but a number approaching nearly none.
Now they got the guy that's supposed to oversee all of that.
Right, who's accused.
Well, he's had to resign.
Why isn't he shot? Oh, did I say that? But no, maybe that's barbaric. Because somebody asked me that once. Why don't we just? No, shooting them's too quick. Needle? No, that's too nice. I like the old style African way. This elder in Accra was telling me how they used to do this in the old days. Basically, it was your family that was part of the jury and the judge, et cetera, but the law was you can't spill your own blood's blood, so they bury you up to your neck in the jungle and leave you.
Ooh-wee. Put one of the dumb,
Not bury you alive, your head is above the ground.
Get that.
Because that's bad. Whatever you did was bad, and you got lots of chances to reform, and you didn't.
No.
I guess what would be really cruel is putting you ahead of army ants. That would really hurt. But
Jungle then.
okay, that's old school. Way old school. Well, you don't have crime waves. Pre-colonial. If a rapist is likely to face, you know, the women of the tribe meting out justice, you're not going to have a whole lot of rapes. That's old school, though. Here we are, 21st century. All right? So in LA County, every 9 days, a woman is killed by her domestic partner. 770 women have been killed in LA using that formula since Nicole. Have you ever heard of them? No. So the rate for our area is basically every 3 weeks, roughly, on average.
Murdered?
By their domestic partner, yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So, Crouching Tiger, we focus on OJ and all those issues around the OJ trial, but we're not looking at, okay, OJs are created. OJ Simpson did nothing that a rich white man in his position hasn't done or wouldn't do. What would a rich white dude do if he had murdered his wife? Well, hire the best lawyer, get himself off.
Robert Blake.
Robert Blake, first trial with Phil Spector, et cetera, et cetera.
He got his. So.
Okay? Well, yeah, he did get his, but you know that doesn't always happen. So these people are basically created. So Lane County is basically every 3 weeks, roughly. So that's part of the hidden dragon, right? So an OJ, as an example, cannot take personal responsibility until he's aware of and can command the forces that shape his thought processes. No therapy will work with him that doesn't focus on the thought processes that created him. Okay? Now, mainstream psychology. Would OJ, growing up poor in a housing project in Hunters Point, San Francisco, be subjected to racism? Yes. No psychology takes that into account now. Now, he said on Geraldo, this is televised. My source for this is Dr. Julianne Malveaux, who was kicking back in a hotel on a speaking tour and saw this. God made a mistake in making me black.
I remember that.
Okay, remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, so do you think O.J. Simpson got the God made a mistake in making me black from his black mama? No. You think he got it from his black wife? No.
Didn't he go to Lowell High School, which is a
Yeah,
white school?
you're right. Right.
And back then it was a prestigious school.
Sure. And he got a scholarship to SC and all that kind of stuff. O.J. Simpson, this is part of what, I'm admitting this. This is part of what pisses me off about him. He was used as a role model for us to emulate because he never talked about racism and we were taught to be successful. Okay? Because successful black people don't talk about racism. That's the model. Okay? Well, clearly, not dealing with racism and understanding what its effect was on him messed his head up. I'm sorry. God made a mistake in making me black, and that's different than, say, Dr. Martin Delany, who says, Frederick Douglass said of him. So Martin Delany was a Union Army major during Civil War. We talked about him second term. Frederick Douglass said, I thank God for making me a man. But Martin Delany thanks God every day for making him a black man. O.J. Simpson ain't thanking God. Okay? So, who made him think? Basically, we would call that racial self-hatred. Okay? Where did he get that attitude from? Not from the black community, not from his wife. Where did he get the attitude? If I can't have you, no one will. That's one of the thoughts behind driving domestic violence. Look, if he's a black man basically hating himself,
Upper class environment,
prestigious school, okay? He needs the trapping of success, fly house, fly car. Wait, in America we have this concept, trophy wife. You get a trophy for accomplishing something. What does a trophy wife look like? Sing it out.
Blonde hair,
blue-eyed, huh? Young, sexy. Who taught him that Nicole was a symbol of success over his black wife that he had kids with? Huh? Where'd he get that? Not from his black mama, not from his black wife.
She was a waitress.
She was a waitress in a restaurant that he couldn't have eaten in 30 years before because it was segregated. So I'm just saying, there's a bunch of hidden dragons here that ain't being talked about. That if we created our own mental health system to deal with people in the community, we could prevent certain problems. Where do you get the attitude, if I can have you, no one will? So assuming as I do that he did it, because there's now information suggesting that he didn't, but I'm going to go with what I believe. Because if you believe that stuff, you were sick enough to do it.
What I believe was meth psychosis.
Could be.
That's what I believe.
Okay? So I don't like people who don't claim their blackness until they're in trouble and play the race card, so to speak. And I'm upfront about that bias. Okay? But the DV is there. The racial self-hatred is there. And even if he didn't do it, you still have to deal with that in therapy if you had therapy. Which therapy doesn't exist, which is why this model is presented, okay, this is what healthy treatment would look like. Your question?
Never mind.
So come with it, please.
It wasn't really a question. It was more like, how can we actually really blame OJ for not wanting to be black when all of the media portrays is people of color are bad people?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well,
OJ is considered a little different.
there are a lot of OJs out there. Part of my anger, and I'll admit it, is I was OJ for 3 weeks in 4th grade.
I think we've all been.
Yeah, many of us have gone through that.
I've never been over.
Okay. I was OJ for 3 weeks
Hold
in
up,
4th grade.
Hold up, what's that mean? I missed that part, I stepped out.
What?
I must have been OJ for a minute.
No, I was OJ for 3 weeks in 4th grade.
But what does that mean?
Well, contextually, okay? I was bused from South Central to Bel Air, and for the first 6 months, I got picked last for games after the fat kid. Even after I'd made plays for all those, pick last, choose up sides for basketball or softball or sockball or whatever, and I got picked last after the fat kid for 6 months. And, obviously being the only black kid in the class, it's like, why? Why don't they like me? What did I do? What did I do? Maybe if I start flipping my hair, I had a short little afro. Started wearing Ocean Pacific, surfer gear and, whoa, far out, man. All that. And I realized, whoa, wait. There's nothing wrong with me. They're messed up. Oh, okay. Now I get it. Okay, I need to get my head right.
Put you ahead of the game when you think.
And then I realized, wow, okay. So, the fat kid actually was pretty good, had a really good outside shot, and he was Jewish. So there was another element to that discrimination too. So beginning to see that level, right? So I understand racial self-hatred. I hated myself for 3 weeks because it was normal to discriminate against me in that setting, and you couldn't report that as discrimination in 1965. Nor did we have, the published psychology to be able to talk about that stuff. either, even though I live with a psychiatrist. But I started reading, right? So part of the idea, right, is, you know, using of blackness when there's a race card. So what do you do about this? Because the forces are still out there. So, la cultura cura, that is, culture is the healing stuff. Culture is the cure, slaying hidden dragons. So we're doing a composite. When counselors speak, we do composite, which is actually a collection, a real composite is several different cases put together to basically make a teaching story. So this is a very thinly veiled composite. Othello Jamal Sampson, a 50-year-old African-American addict alcoholic, retired. Client presented at the center with a history of poly-drug use after an arrest for suspicion of distribution of controlled substance, ecstasy, a federal crime which actually happened with OJ. Client's family of origin issues included being raised in urban poverty, single-parent homes, sports scholarship led to athletic success, and diversification into the entertainment industry. As a celebrity, his rumored consumption of substances was legendary, including alcohol, cocaine, marijuana, LSD, mushrooms. He has self-reported smokable cocaine and made reference to Robin Williams' joke, during intake, cocaine is God's way of telling you you're making too much money. His 4 children from 2 marriages, the first 2 with an African-American woman, the second with a Caucasian woman he married when she was 18 at a restaurant he was attending with his first wife on their anniversary. The second wife had 2 children by him and was brutally murdered. He was the prime suspect but was able to win acquittal. There was a history of domestic violence in both marriages. Client has made public statements denying any role in the murder and declaring that God made a mistake in making him black. Consistently, many public statements attributed to the client indicate an ambivalence toward his racial identity and an ambivalence towards the black community in general. After winning custody of his children, he moved to another state. Source of income has purportedly been a pension fund, as many assets were frozen due to legal judgments made against his estate and ongoing debt and legal payment expenses. He was court-ordered to complete treatment. So, what if you were treating him and you had to use a model that worked? And you weren't taught that model in school. And you had to rely on certain cultural strengths that he may have turned away from, but you could still assume that he possesses because he's been referred to your center for the cultural match. So the Western diagnosis, that is the cause implies a cure, DSM-4, cocaine, marijuana, alcohol dependence, stimulant abuse, paranoid schizophrenia, dual diagnosis, that is he's both addicted and got a mental illness, the usual Western cure, drugs and psychotherapy that doesn't mention race. Do you think there'll be a successful prognosis using Western? No. That's why his ass is in jail. Also because of subsequent crimes, too. So, here's an indigenous African-American psychological construct. I made it up. I admit it. The Kemetic Diagnostic Matrix. Classic ragamuffin syndrome. Acute cultural dislocation, retrograde cultural amnesia, white supremacy stress disorder. He's got 3rd-degree racial self-hatred. So, ragamuffin syndrome. Did I explain ragamuffin?